Pick up your copy of The Iron Ring. So I'm going to be sharing a scene from The Iron Ring. Around noon, the news reports flashed an update. The body of Ivan Crane, a former associate and later rival of prison escapee Tobe Hanrick, was found by his wife in the basement of their home near Kingman, Arizona at 8 o'clock this morning. Crane and Hanrick, who escaped from the Williams Correctional Facility sometime between lights out last night and the wake-up call this morning, were locked in a struggle for control of the drug trade in Kingman when Hanrick was arrested in connection with the torture killing of University of Arizona student Sarah Pearson. Police are withholding the cause of Crane's death. Lizzie entered Kingman into her map app, almost 3 hours away from Sedona. That evening, another former Hanrick associate turned informant was found hanging in his hotel room in Las Vegas, 2 hours from Kingman and in the opposite direction from Sedona. As she made her 10th check of Andy's flight status within the previous hour, she noticed that the phone's battery icon was red, showing just a tiny sliver of remaining life. She sighed and went to where she had left her knapsack by the door. The power cord wasn't in the pocket where she usually kept it. She checked the other pockets and inside the knapsack. No cord. She went through her other bags and even checked inside the styrofoam cooler. Still no cord. Maybe she had left it in the van. She went to the door and looked out. The driveway was well lit by a floodlight, and the van was only about 30 feet from the door of the casita. More important, she could hear the sounds of a party at the house next door, and some of the partiers had spilled out into the backyard. If she could hear them chatting and laughing so clearly, they would certainly be able to hear her if she ran into trouble and called out. And if someone actually attacked her, there was the squeeze. She stepped outside and scanned the area, but the floodlight didn't illuminate much beyond the driveway itself. She locked the casita door behind her so that no one could slip in while she checked the van, and then scurried to the vehicle. She looked everywhere she could think of, between and underneath the seats, under and inside the sleeping bag, even in the space under the stowed back seats where the last of her dwindling supply of cash was hidden, popping her head up periodically to make sure no one had appeared from the darkness. Eventually, she had to concede that the cord was not in the van either. She'd have to run to the store to get a cord. She couldn't afford to be out of touch with Philip or Uncle Owen or Andy at this point. Much to her annoyance, her phone died as she pulled out of the driveway, so she didn't have a way to search for where to go to buy a power cord. She wasn't aware of any Targets or Walmarts near Sedona, and a slow drive up the main tourist drag didn't reveal any likely-looking sources. After some pondering, she drove to one of the hotels just a few blocks from Philip's house, pulling into a parking space in the lot in back, and went to the main desk. "Excuse me, I lost the phone to my iPhone, the cord to my iPhone." "You came to the right place," said the man behind the desk with a laugh. "We could open an electronics accessory shop if we wanted to." He went into the back room and emerged a minute later with a box overflowing with cords. "Will one of these do the trick?" Lizzie sorted through the cords. "Yeah, this one is like mine." She glanced up at him. "I can't tell for sure if it's mine. Is it okay if I take it anyway?" "Sure," he said, "not doing anyone any good sitting in our lost and found box." She returned to the van humming, pleased at her inventiveness, and consoling herself that she hadn't actually lied to the guy at the desk. The night was dark, but the parking lot was well lit, and her nerves were soothed by the fact that she could hear the murmur of conversation from a car parked a few spaces away from the van. Perhaps someone speaking on their phone, since she could only hear one voice. She slipped the key into the lock and was jiggling it to get it to turn when she heard the voice moving away from the car. She stopped the jiggling to listen more closely. The voice was approaching the van from the other side. Her heart beating harder, she renewed her efforts to turn the key in the door lock. The voice, definitely a man, was getting closer. She glanced around, realizing that a lit parking lot was no safer than an unlit one if there was no one there to see her. But did she really need to be nervous? If someone were trying to sneak up on her, he would hardly be talking as he approached. She tried to force the key to turn, but it remained stubbornly unmovable. Her heart was hammering now, the man just on the other side of the van. This should be fun. Her fingers froze on the key as a sickening realization dawned on her. She turned toward where the man was stepping around the front of the van. "Hey there, sweetheart," said Tobe Hanrick. looking even better than I remembered. She drew in a breath to scream, but two instincts stopped her. One was a lifetime of programming by her parents, by Uncle Owen, to avoid attracting attention. The other was the idea that in a moment, Tobe Hanrick was going to meet the same fate as her other victims. Maybe she would be able to discharge her promise to Philip after all. She stepped backwards, wanting to postpone the inevitable, and Hanrick stepped after her. "I've been looking forward to seeing you again," he said with a grin. She saw a movement out of the corner of her eye. An object flashed in front of her face, and suddenly there was something around her neck. "Don't scream," a voice hissed in her ear. She couldn't have screamed if she wanted to. The van key and the power cord fell to the ground as she tried to get her fingers under whatever was around her throat, but it was too tight. Tobe stood grinning at her, enjoying her panic. Her heart was hammering from the shock of the encounter, but at any moment, Hanrick and the man tightening the noose around her neck would collapse as blood vessels burst in their brains. But the noose didn't loosen. On the contrary, it tightened as the man behind her used it to lift her to her toes. Tobe bent to pick up the key and cord. Lizzie kicked out toward him, but she was too far from him, and the movement put more pressure on her neck. She kicked her heel back into the leg of the man who was strangling her. "God damn," he yelped, and cinched the noose tighter. "Hurry up, Tobe!" Tobe turned to the van door and inserted the key. Her blood pounded in her ears, her lungs strained in vain for oxygen. The darkness started to take on a dancing sparkle that wasn't from the parking lot lights. "Can't get the goddamn key to turn," she heard Tobe say, and then, "A car isn't quite as good as a van for what I have in mind."